Okay, so uh, what is literature? Our first lecture on literature itself. Now, I will begin by referring to John Donne's poem, The Good Morrow. In fact, that poem is in the first part of the book as well that I shared with you. Okay, there is a discussion about that. Okay, but I would like you to see this animation as well, watch this animation as well about the good morrow. Now, the point that I would like to emphasize from the animation is this. You might have noticed there is uh, a certain component of entertainment when you watch a video which is animated. Okay, sometimes there is a certain component of seriousness in an animation that you watch. That is, a producer wants you to get a message out of a video. Therefore, animation as a technological tool is used to convey a message. Now, we have a poem here, okay, and the poem has been turned into an animation. That kind of confirms the fact that a literary text has a potential for both entertainment and conveying serious message. Okay, so if we pose this question to ourselves, what is literature? One answer we probably can have is that literature is a kind of knowledge which can entertain as well as which can teach us or which can give us a serious message. Now, why this poem is a literary text? The Good Morrow by John Donne. Number one, it can entertain. So if you read through the poem, you would realize that the poet is imagining a beloved. Okay. And in a rhythmical form, he is expressing his closeness with that imagined beloved. And there are two elements which stand kind of apart from the rest of many elements that he refers to. One is what he says, for what he says, and true plain hearts do in the faces rest. And the other one is, my face in thine eye, thine in mine appears. So if you look at this statement, and a true plain heart and true plain hearts do in the faces rest. I'm sure you can kind of visualize the uh, comparison that the poet is trying to make over here. And the comparison is this, that a plain heart stands for innocence. And this is an expression which is common in our culture as well. You might have heard this expression very common, Sada Dil Ke Log, right? So plain heart. So he is referring to the fact that he as a lover and his beloved, they were like or are like innocent lovers. Their love was without any deceit, without any vested benefit or interest. It was a pure love. It was pure to the extent that people could even see their simple heart being displayed on their face or being expressed through their face. All right? So the word heart is being used, therefore, as a metaphor. Okay? A metaphor technically is an expression which stands for something else. Okay? So the heart, heart otherwise is a muscular chamber. Okay? It is a muscular part of body, and it pumps blood, and it has all those tissues and all those biological functions. That is the real heart. But in this verse, The real heart stands for purity, innocence. Therefore, the heart is a metaphor. Alright? And then another line in the poem, my face in thine eye, thine in mine appears. Now, this is a phenomenon of physics. Those who study lens, they are aware of the fact that there is a certain kind of lens in human eye, okay, which creates an image, an inverse image of the thing which is in front of it. All right, and this is, a day-to-day observed phenomenon that if we are standing close to somebody, we can see our own image in the iris of the other person's eyes, and the same happens with other person as well. But the poet is very clever. He is using that phenomenon, he is referring to that phenomenon, and he is describing that phenomenon to emphasize his closeness with his beloved. Now, over here, the poet is drawing a parallel, but his cleverness lies in the fact that now in this case, when he refers to the eye, he means the real eye. And when he refers to the face, he means the real face. Okay, in the previous line, heart did not stand for heart itself, but that stood for purity, innocence. Alright, but in this line, my face in thine eye, both biological, muscles of human body, which is face and eye, they stand for themselves. Okay, now this case is called the case of parallel and contrast. Okay, now together these cases can stand for, in fact, parallel and contrast. But over here, face has been used to draw a kind of comparison once again, but a comparison where thing stands for itself. It does not stand for anything else. But in this case, the thing does not stand for itself but stands for something else. Now this case is called metaphor, but this case would be a simple parallel and contrast. Okay. So drawing a parallel between two things. Okay. So the face, the reflection of face in the eye is paralleled with the love between lover and beloved. So it is a plain parallel which we can immediately get. But this one is a metaphorical parallel or comparison. Alright, but this one is a kind of, we can call it, it is a realistic parallel or comparison. Alright. Now, why this poem is a literary text? The poem by John Donne. Why this poem is a literary text? This poem is a literary text because it can entertain. When you read love being described in this manner, you cannot help but enjoy the description of that true love. And then the poem has some aesthetics value. That is, you observe a certain rhyme in the lines when you read through the lines. And then the poem has a truth value to it. And this is an interesting aspect of a literary text. Why? Because the poet in fact belongs to 17th century. This is a 17th century poet. Okay, and he is representing love according to his own cultural and social context. Probably in present day Britain, love is not celebrated this way. Maybe it is celebrated in a different way. So if we look at the poem from this perspective, then the poem becomes a very good representation of the values related to love with special reference to 17th century. So if you want to know how people celebrated love or relationship based upon love in 17th century England, then John Donne is a good poet to refer to. So there is a truth value in it as well. So somebody asked, is literature fictional? No, look, it is fictional, but fictional does not mean lie. It does not mean untrue. It does not mean unreal. Fictional has its own grain of truth, which sometimes is more important than what we call objective truth. All right. And then it is a literary text because there is a metaphor in it. And metaphor is the soul of a literary text. Literary texts are usually based upon metaphors. There are extended metaphors, there are limited metaphors. Okay, sometimes one whole novel is based upon a big metaphor, right? So there is a very famous novel by E.M. Forster. It is called A Passage to India. India. Okay. Now that novel, A Passage to India, is about what? It is about the colonization of India by the British government, I should say. Now, a passage to India becomes a metaphor. You know, passage to India, we can visualize maybe it is a sea route or maybe some kind of route which kind of leads you to India from the Britain. But it becomes a metaphor of how the colonizers traveled to India and occupied it. So, a definition of literature which is given in this handout, in this chapter that I referred you to read. So, literature is writing that you want to read even though you have read it before. In fact, it is writing that you want to read all the more because you have read it before. So, a piece of writing which entertains you once, but it does not exhaust itself of its possibilities and of its meanings. It is so multi-layered, it is so complex. For example, John Donne's poem, whose animation I played for you, and the poem which is included in the handout that I shared with you. I didn't assign that as a kind of reading, but the poem is there. Now, I only refer to 2 lines from the whole poem. There is a lot more in that. But if you recall that the poem has been written in 17th century by a poet, and then have another look at the line about face and eye, you should in fact be surprised by the fact that a poet of 17th century was aware of this image-making phenomenon of the presence of lens in human eye. So his observation was really, really deep. Okay. Now, that means there are too many angles to analyze the poem. If you want to analyze the poem and the poet in general as a poet who incorporates scientific discoveries in his poetry, John Donne is one of the best poets to do that. In many of his poems, he refers to quite a number of scientific discoveries of his times. So 200 years, 300 years ahead in future, if you still want to see what was the level of scientific discoveries in 17th century England, you cannot ignore John Donne, because he is one of the poets who passionately and on purpose incorporated these scientific discoveries in his work. So that could be another way to read the poem. or the poet. So that is why we want to read and reread a literary text, and that is another definition of a literary text. A literary text is one which does not exhaust itself of its possibilities. So, coming back to the question, what is literature? So, literature is a text which has a form and content together. And then it is a text which is based upon imagination and creativity, and emphasizes on that a lot. It is a text which is inspired by subjective opinion rather than objective perspectives. So there could be a legal perspective about any issue, but legal perspective has to be based upon the actual written down textual laws. The laws must have been written somewhere, and whatever perspective you want to bring upon, legal perspective you want to bring upon an issue, it has to be tied with the clear-cut, well-written legal documents. On the other hand, a literary perspective or a literary output does not require any such pre-written legal documents. Rather, it could be a totally new inspiration from any imagined situation. All right? So that is what we mean subjectivity. So in fact, subjectivity is celebrated in literature because that is what literature is about. And then artistry. You cannot differentiate probably between artistic development and literary development in any particular society. They kind of overlap with each other, and they have their base in certain literary or artistic movements. So in fact, a literary text is a representation of art through words. So somebody said, I think Ifer Evans once said that words are to literature what paints are to art. Okay, so poetry therefore is also a kind of painting, but in words. Greatness. So greatness means literature or literary text is abiding. It stands the test of time. 2000 years ago, literary text has been written 2000 years ago. It still survives today. Okay, that is what we mean by greatness. There are other meanings of it as well, but we will get to them later on. Okay, it continues. Now, other than these aspects of literature that I just referred to, we also need to understand that literature is a construct. So when in the previous slide, when we say that it is based upon imagination and creativity and it is subjective, sometimes we tend to understand literature as something which has always been there. But in fact, that is not the case. Despite all the abstraction we attach to literature, despite all the subjectivity we attach with literature, and despite all the imagination that we associate with literature, despite all that, literature is a construct. What does it mean literature is a construct? That means literature is invented, it is made, it is man-made, it is produced, it is not in nature. Okay, it is product of human mind.
So it is made like 18th century, in the last of 17th century.
No, in fact, so your question is if literature is invented in 18th century? My answer is no, that is not the case. So we can go back in history, you know. So probably the earliest literature which still survives is from Greece period, which is AD, you know, which is BC, you know, before the birth of Christ. Okay, so you can have history of like 2,500 years of literature. It is predominantly European literature. Okay, so some people regard religious texts also as representations of literature. Okay, for example, the Bible or the Quran or such other religious books. They are also considered to be literary texts sometimes. Okay, so there is a very long history of literature. Okay, it's not limited to 200 years or 300 years. Just the example we had over here was from 17th century. Okay, there are writers well before that. We are dealing with English literature. Even in English literature, we can go as back as 14th century. Okay, so we have 600 to 700 years of English literature as well, literature written in English. All right. So when we say literature is a construct, we kind of, are stuck between two extremes. The first extreme is that we say literature is product of imagination and it is kind of product of subjectivity. But over here, when we say literature is a construct, it appears as if these two elements oppose each other. When we say it is totally subjective, it seems like it does not have root in anything which is material. And when we say it is construct, it feels like it is a construct like we construct a building. Now, how to resolve this kind of opposing binary? It's very easy. What happens is when creative writers, artists, or writers in general, when they create a literary text, they withdraw themselves from it. They maintain a distance from it. In other words, they do not just throw out their personal experiences in their writing. So when I refer to John Donne's poem, and I refer to those two lines, not necessarily the beloved he was referring to was the beloved of the poet himself. Are you getting my point? Maybe John Donne was imagining the lover and beloved both. Alright? So both lover and beloved are product of the poet's mind. So we shouldn't assume that when a poet writes a poem, that poem is externalization of his own experiences or her own experiences. On the other hand, the poet in fact withdraws himself from his own personal life, leaves him out of it, or keeps that out of his creativity, okay, and creates something which appears to be distant from the poet. All right. That is why writers are able to write so much, which far exceeds their life as well. Dostoevsky, for example, who wrote, Russian novelist. So his novels are spread over thousands and thousands of pages. Nobody can live that much life even. All right. So therefore, the writers are creative. They create out of imagination, but still, whatever they create is a construction. It is a structure.
Their own experience.
There is some reflection of their experience in that, but they do not just throw their experience out as a piece of writing.
Their personal opinions.
Sorry?
Like their personal
A little bit of personal experience might be reflected in that, okay? But their creativity is not their personal experience. Rather, they get rid of it, they overcome it. And that is why they become big writers.
So, but when we are trying to be creative, they are using their own ideas. But then we can say that ideas are also constructed.
Exactly. That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Yeah. So, the narrators, for example, are invented. Okay, so there is a reference in this handout to David Wallace's short story Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature. Okay, and the writer discusses with reference to the narrator in this particular short story, which is called Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature, that the narrator is able to create something which belongs to his life, but at the same time it goes beyond his life. And that is why D.H. Lawrence famously said, never trust the artist, trust the tale, trust the story. Okay, now two important points. What do writers do when they write literature? So the writers may or may not expose themselves in their work. This is first thing. Second thing, writers perform in their real life as well as in their work. By perform, we mean, in simple words, we can say they pretend. Okay, but that is too simplistic explanation. The matter of the fact is that the writers create a persona, a public persona or persona in public, and persona in their work of art. And they cash on that too. Some people call it, there was a poet, Irish poet called W.B. Yeats. He called it mask. The example just came to my mind because of the mask we are wearing. So he used to say that a writer must have multiple masks. So when he goes to public, he should wear one mask, and when he writes or she writes, she or he should wear a different mask. His theory was that the more masks you can invent and wear, the more successful person you are.
So, different personalities.
Persona, exactly, personality. Absolutely right. So, when you are a teacher, you are wearing a certain mask, but don't believe in the fact that that is the only mask you can carry. Okay, so there was unique thing about W.B. Yeats that he was kind of vibrant and active in quite a number of fields. So he was a writer, he was an activist, he was a political leader, he was senator to the first Irish parliament as well. So his own life was quite diverse. So he could we can call that mask performance as well. So the writers in fact perform. Okay, it is more true of the actors these days. Actors also do the same thing. They carry a persona for TV drama, another persona for film, and another persona for the public. Okay,
Different characters perform different characters.
that is one thing, but they also live their real life. So even their real life is another performance. All right. So Yeats, Yeats. Yeats. Okay, and then writers do another thing, that is they narrate and they characterize. So when they write, they are telling a story, and when they tell a story, they create characters. So this is what writers do. Writers either sometimes they expose, sometimes they don't expose themselves in their work. They keep performing different roles, and then they narrate and they characterize. Now, what do readers do when it comes to literature? So readers basically engage in active interpretation of a text or a literary text, as we were just engaged in that when we were reading those two lines by John Donne. If the readers don't do that, then literature cannot exist by itself. So in fact, readers kind of give life to literature by reading it, by interpreting it. And then readers become co-performers as well. Writers are performers, but readers are their co-performers, because a writer cannot perform if their performance is not acknowledged or watched or viewed by the readers. So it is the readers who kind of interpret those lives and those works and thereby give meaning to those lives or those works. And then readers also read, they misread, and sometimes they read too much into it, into a piece of text. So I took this phrase from the handout itself. So basically, reading too much into it means you try to produce an interpretation of the text which seems to be far-fetched. It's very hard to convince the readers that that interpretation is true. And then readers also try to reach at the author's intention. So author's intention is a kind of technical word in literature, okay? We are aware of this word very well in our day-to-day life, okay? But in literature, it almost carries the same meaning. But, so let me describe. So, whenever we read a novel, we draw a meaning out of it. We draw a meaning out of it. Now, other writers and critics, they believe that a meaning that you draw out of a literary text is your unique meaning of the text. Your unique meaning of the text. So, exactly, that may not be the intention of the author.
So, as we read twice or thrice, then we understand the intention, what is the real meaning.
That's true, yeah. Similarly, if you meet other people and talk to other people who have read the same text and ask them what did they understand out of it.
The point of view is very different from
Exactly. So each one of the readers will have a different meaning of the text in their mind. Okay. So the critics or the writers believe, interestingly enough, that all those meanings which all those readers have still may not be the actual intention of the writer. Okay, and now some critics have started believing in the fact that writer's intention does not exist. It is a fallacy. It is a fallacy.
Is it true?
I don't know true or not, but in the historical development of literary criticism for the last 100 years, critics agree on the fact that writer's intention does not exist. Okay.
So,
Then
was
why
it
Sir
80%?
George wrote all of this thing, Albert Camus?
So we have the whole course to discuss this question. Why is that? But that is a big critical, question, whether or not writer's intention exists. Probably writer's intention does not exist. Okay. But as readers, we try to deal with the writer's intention when we read a text.
So, and a good writer always put it on the reader how he interprets his message.
Yeah.
He actually don't went to the point in his text.
True. Yeah. So that is what we call post-structuralism. But I don't want to kind of confuse you people with such terminology yet. Okay. We will deal with them later on. And then, finally, as a reader, what we do, we find tension between form and meaning of the text. What its form looks like and what is its meaning. And then the tension between narrator and character. What is a narrator in a literary text saying, and what are the characters in a text performing? And then we try to find tension between author, reader, and text. And finally, we try to understand the tension between truth and representation.
Sir, is there any way that we can find that जैसे हम लोग एक जुमला मिलता है किसी लिटरेचर में हमें ये पता नहीं चलता बहुत दिक्कतों से पता चलता है कि ये कैरेक्टर का इंटेंशन था या फिर ऑथर नैरेटर का इंटेंशन था. Is there any way to find whose intention or ये कौन कहना चाह रहा है या फिर
So Faisal's question is, does the intention of the author really exist? Well, that really depends on your own educated perspective about literature. Now, my educated perspective about literature is that it does not exist. Author's intention does not exist.
No, sir.
That is why we read literature again and again.
सर लाइक हमें कैसे पता चलेगा कि लाइक अगर कैरेक्टर कुछ बात करे हमें ये पता चल सकेगा कि हमें यहाँ पे नरेटर यहाँ पे हमें कुछ कन्विंस करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं या फिर ये सिर्फ इट इज पार्ट ऑफ कैरेक्टर कुछ भी बोलना चाह रहा है.
So we don't need to find that, you know. We don't need to find that, you know. We can make quite a number of interpretation of the text. So one interpretation at one time, in the second reading, you might draw a different interpretation of the text. Okay. So there is no final interpretation. There is no one interpretation of the text. Right? So characters, the meaning of what characters say can vary from reading to reading, from person to person. So as you jump into reading literature, you should keep these four expressions constantly in your mind. That you as a reader are trying to find tension between these expressions.
Sir, I didn't get you.
So when you read, why will you read a text at all? And what will you do with it? Will you tell your reader or your examiner or your professor, okay, well, this text is about a gentleman and a lady and a kind of, a relationship between both of them and the relationship between both of the families, and then will you stop telling anything else? No, this is what you will not do and should not do as a student of literature. Rather, you should try to do some technical analysis of a literary text. Okay,
Maybe
so
we will try to tell us the message that we perceive from that specific text.
no, quite the contrary. In fact, this is what I was trying to say, that we should not try to think of a message of a literary text, or we should not try to think of what is the content of the text. Rather, we should try to handle it from technical perspective as students of literature. If you just want to enjoy, only then you can say, okay, the novel is about honesty, or it is about loyalty, or it is about patriotism, and thing is over, you can put it away.
Then what is the technical perspective?
So technical perspectives are right here. You can tell somebody or professor, you can write about the form of a text. What does the form look like? Is it poetic, non-poetic, rhythmical, non-rhythmical? Is there any lyric in it? Is there any melody in it? What kind of paragraphs are there? Why the writer has chosen this kind of paragraphs? Okay, why the sentences are longer? Why they are shorter? What kind of vocabulary the writer has used? This comes under form. Okay, so or you can talk about the narrator. What kind of narrator is that? Is that a reliable narrator, unreliable narrator, authentic narrator, inauthentic narrator, things of that kind? And similarly, what is the relationship between author and text, or reader or text? We were just talking about the question of intention. That comes under this point. And then truth and representation. What does a literary piece of work represent? Now, representation is a huge technical term in literature. What do we mean by represent? Can anybody represent anything? What is the reliability of representation? So you should kind of dig deeper into these four expressions and try to look at each piece of literature from these four perspectives and bring about the technical analysis of the text. Instead of just saying that the story is about a boy or a girl or an animal or scene or whatever, okay? So go beyond the content analysis. That should be your aim. Go beyond the content analysis of a text.
Sir, so a literary text's meaning would be different from its representation. In will be different.
So texts themselves are representations. Texts themselves are representations. But what do they represent? Are they reliable representer? Does the language have capacity to represent? So these are the questions we deal with when we study representation. So Plato is considered to be one of the pioneer philosophers of question of representation. He has written a lot about representation. But then this discussion continues.